shall overcome. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome.
We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead.
For the African American community, that path means embracing.
Welcome, everybody. Woo! Let's give a little cheer, yup. So I want to start and just ask everyone to look around and give thanks to the people we are sharing this space with today. When I think of leaders like Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Maury Evers, and Mamie Till, I think about their capacity to love and to fight for what they love, in order to give us all a chance to love each other. We cannot talk about any event in American history without acknowledging racism and white supremacy and the legacy of that today. As Michelle Alexander says, the racial caste is not dead. It is alive and well in America. In a space and time like this, I cannot disregard my whiteness. As white people, we have the choice to see the injustices Black people and people of color are victims of every day. We also have the choice to fight for that change, as lives depend on it. Let us all be present here together and stick together as time moves forward.
Today, we are tasked with the role of understanding the prevalence of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I too recognize my identity and work to become a better ally to the Black community, searching for any way to be a supportive individual. At today's assembly, Dr. John Charles said history is often summed up by the dominant narrative. As I reflected on this after her talk, I realized there was so much truth in this, as growing up, I was never told much beyond the famous I Have a Dream speech. There are so many stories that are left untold and names we never hear, like Claudette Colvin and her bus protests that are just as powerful as Rosa Parks. Let's continue to embrace these incredible stories of grit, determination, and discipline, but also not be afraid of challenging the dominant narrative and asking the question, whose story is not being told?
And just a quick shout out to Dr. John Charles. There's books back there, there's signing. Y'all all need to get one. The book cover is so pretty. I love that. Yes, y'all all go get one.
Good evening, everyone. For those I've not had a chance to meet yet, I'm Todd Bland, the head of school here at MIlton, and it's a real honor to be with you this evening. Thank you for welcoming us, Victor and Robin. And it's a special evening, an evening of celebration, of contemplation, and of growth for our community. And there's no place that I would rather be than right here with all of you. For people who are visitors, people who are not here each and every day, we welcome you especially. All of us are perhaps thinking of our remembrances, our memories of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all that he represents in our lives. Thank you. There are going to be a lot of thanks to Dr. Jean Charles for your amazing speech earlier today. It's really helped broaden, I think, our entire community's perspective on Dr. King, and for that we're grateful. A round of applause, actually. We'll see her in a moment. We're all resonating on different elements of that moment for our community, and for me, it's a reflection on I love the word nuance, the nuanced understanding of Dr. King's legacy. I reflect back, as my guess is many of you do too, at this time of year on the powerful words that he shared with our world. and I think often and begin a daily practice of meditation for myself in thinking and reminding myself that indeed darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And this evening, as we enjoy the extraordinary light of the spoken word, of poetry, of dance, of music, I think about the love and the celebration of our beloved community here, and what a wonderful way to pay tribute to an incredible man, a man not without flaw, but an incredible man himself. A reflection I would share with you, and when I think about and appreciate the nuance of his life, is to acknowledge that he was indeed not perfect, a hero, but not perfect, allows me a little more access into being human myself in the work that we all need to do to create a just society. If indeed the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not perfect, I acknowledge my imperfection, and that all of us still in our own small ways can be heroes to help our community and the world be a bit better. So with that, thank you. With that, I again welcome all of you. The three of us will say a few more things at the end, but we are just so grateful for your presence, for being together, and we really entice you, welcome you to enjoy this evening together. Thank you.
And now, a letter from the king himself in a Birmingham jail in 1963. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I have yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was well-timed in the view of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now, I have heard the word wait. It rings in my ears. It rings in the ears of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied.
And now an excerpt from Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution, 1965. All I'm saying is simply this, that all mankind is tied together, all life is interrelated, and we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one indirectly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. John Donne caught it years ago and placed it in the graphic terms. No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of a continent, a part of the main. And then goes on toward the end to say, any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. And by believing this, by living out this fact, we will be able to remain awake through a great revolution.
Now we will view a video from the lower school entitled We Are.
Share with other people. Stand up for other people. Be respectful to your teachers. Recycle. Have empathy for others. Say kind words to each other. Hold the door. others. Pick up after yourself. Include others. Smile. Be kind.
Why We Can't Wait, 1964. Time itself is neutral. It can be used either destructively or constructively. More and more, I feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Human progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to work to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always ripe to do right.
The Three Evils of Society, 1967. Somewhere we must see that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I have fought too long and too hard against segregated public accommodations to end up at this point in my life, segregating my moral concerns. So let us stand in this convention knowing that on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And on some positions, it is necessary for the moral individual to take a stand that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because it is right.
Now we will hear from the Upper School Jazz Band playing two songs, Liberated Brother and Do Mi So La So.
Sound the trumpet name by starting off with a piece for four trumpets. And now I'd like to read an excerpt from Where Do We Go From Here, 1967. One of the great liabilities of history is that all too many people fail to remain awake through a great period of social change. Every society has its protectors of status quo and its fraternities of the indifferent who are notorious for sleeping through revolutions. Today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. Please welcome to the stage our upper school dance group, Ritmo.
Wine pan the body and I sit down on the bed. So tight so my man now fi cheat. Phone take a picture, yeah, that you fit tweet. Tell them girl them wine ya them everything. Ya pull it and I catch it on the beat, me just a drop it. How me twerk it and I slap it on the gong like me a map it. How me stuck it and I pop it and I wine it and I lap it. Take a picture, you fi snap it, Facebook it, but crop it and rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down. Rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down. You honey me girl, rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down. You don't give a you just a rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down, rock down, rock.
A Time to Break Silence, 1967. I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility on poverty, racism, and militarism. Please welcome to the podium Poetry Out Loud winner, Zara Greenidge.
A Dead Man's Dream by Carl Wendell Hines Jr. Now that he is safely dead, let us praise him, build monuments to his glory, sing hosannas to his name. Dead men make such convenient heroes. for they cannot rise to challenge the images that we may fashion from their lives. So, now that he is safely dead, we, with eased consciences, will teach our children that he was a great man, knowing that the cause for which he lived is still a cause, and the dream for which he died is still a dream, a dead man's dream. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We're waiting for someone to come and introduce me. It's a very awkward parenting moment. Very awkward. Luckily, I have 4 children. Do one of you want to introduce me instead? No, he's coming. Yay!
Hello and welcome to the beloved community of MIlton Academy as we gather to recognize Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My name is Bediako Jean Charles Asari, and I'm here to introduce my mother, Regine Michelle Jean Charles, who is MIlton Academy class of 1996. She is a Black feminist literary scholar and cultural critic who works at the intersection of race, gender, and justice. She is currently the Director of Africana Studies, Dean's Professor of Culture and Social Justice, and Professor of Africana Studies and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies at Northeastern University. She's joining us today to speak about her book, Martin Luther King and the Trumpet of Conscience, and her journey from MIlton Academy to writing about Dr. King. Please welcome Dr. Regine Jean Charles.
Oh my gosh! Yay! Give it up for Biko! Or Bediako Desaline, as we call him. Good evening. I'm supposed to do a reading. I'm not supposed to talk, but I love to talk. And so I'm just going to say a few things. First, I want to thank especially the students who are here tonight because they already heard me earlier today. So I really do appreciate you being here. And because you are here, I am not going to read the same thing, or I'm not going to read from the chapter in which the poem is read, which was what my talk from this morning was taken from. But I also want to give a shout out to my friend Lisa Jones-Mack, who's in the audience. She's let me see if I can get this right. P class of 20, is he 27, 28? And then she's an alum, class of 1984. She told me that when she was at MIlton Academy, on Martin Luther King Day, they had class. And a group of them from her class they left class and they marched over to the head of school, I can never pronounce his name, Pierre, I want to make it French, but yeah. So the former head of school, they marched over there and they were like, it's Martin Luther King Day, we're not going to school, we should be doing something to celebrate Martin Luther King Day. This was in the 80s, right? And subsequently, the following year, they did have the school day off, but all the programming was done by the students. And so I thought that was a really interesting anecdote that she told me earlier tonight because it does show, as much as people know, I'm very critical of this idea of how much progress we've made. It does show that at least at MIlton Academy, things are different from how they were in 1984. So I'm going to read from the 2 bookends here. I'll read a little bit from the first chapter from the introduction, which is entitled A Sick Society, and then a little bit from the conclusion, which is called Making Justice Irresistible. And, I always say that this is not a book about Martin Luther King. It's a book that examines 3 social justice movements, Black Lives Matter, #MeToo, and prison abolition, through the lens of a set of speeches that Martin Luther King gave in 1967 entitled A Call to Conscience or The Trumpet of Conscience. And I had 2 motivations in writing the book. One was that I was very, very wary and frustrated by how we remember, celebrate and commemorate Martin Luther King, to the point that every year, I would say an auspicious January day, I would just be filled with dread. And so whenever I was asked, come speak for an MLK event, I'd be like, oh. And so I really wanted to use my own lens of critical thinking to critique that and to think about why, to pull that apart as to why the way that we remember King and the way that we remember King's legacy bothered me so much. And then I also wanted to amplify the voices of people that get left out when we focus so singularly on King. And lastly, I really wanted to think about how our own movements that we have today are really continuing, building upon, and expanding his vision. A sick society. I keep telling you, this is a sick society. Reverend Martin Luther King in 1963. This is a sick society. The same is true, if not even more so, in the 21st century. We are indeed a sick society. So very sick, in fact, that a global public health crisis forcing the entire world to pause could not pause the killing of Black people. It offered no respite from the reality of anti-Black racism and violence in the United States, despite the fact that we had to rest from so many activities, including school, work, travel, leisure, entertainment, and church. The loss and devaluation of Black life manifest in racist violence continued. The pandemic could not put a pause on police brutality, racist violence, or racial terror meted out against Black and brown people in the United States. It could not stem the tide of white supremacy. Indeed, racism has been a feature of the American society since the arrival of the Mayflower, when multiple indigenous populations were wiped out to make way for the Pilgrims. And then again in 1619, with the arrival of the first group of enslaved Africans on the shores of Virginia. Racial injustice has always been flagrantly persistent. Just as the violence against Black people can be traced to slavery and colonization, the determination of Black resistance goes just as far. From the advent of slavery onward, racism has been a feature of US democracy that the enslaved have resisted. The COVID-19 pandemic further amplified the problems of social inequity in our society, as Black and brown people were struck by the disease and subsequently died in disproportionate numbers. It quickly became clear that racial discrimination, as well as the lack of access to healthcare, multiplied the vulnerability of Black people during the pandemic. And the wealth gap exacerbated this vulnerability due to the disproportionate numbers of Black and Latinx people serving as essential workers. As one organizer expressed, the coronavirus has been anything but a great equalizer. It's been a great revealer, pulling the curtain back on the class divide and exposing how deeply unequal this country is. Indeed, the novel coronavirus has magnified the divisions that have long existed in our society, whether it is in the fact that Black and brown people have disproportionately been infected with the virus and denied care, or that what the population of essential workers attest to. This pandemic has magnified racial inequality in the United States, from who is able to socially distance to who is at a greater risk. As this global public health crisis unfolded, I wondered what our social justice warriors would think about this moment. I wondered how Harriet Tubman would lead raids at a time when people could not huddle together for warmth and comfort. I wondered, what would Sojourner Truth say about the Black and brown female essential workers leaving their families to care for others, only to increase potential risk of their own families when they return home? What would Martin Luther King say about the disparities in public health? Knowing that King was an advocate for the poor and the oppressed, I am confident that he would have been appalled and dismayed by how healthcare has been one of the latest platforms for economic and racial injustice to take root. Indeed, the plight of the poor was always foremost in his mind, and he was attentive to how class was operating in the lives of all marginalized people. Given King's enduring commitment to revealing how economic injustice plagues our society, how would he respond to how poverty has made people more vulnerable to COVID-19? How would he react to current lack of access to health care and more harm to people who are sick and poor, or due to the racial wealth gap that has not improved since his death? How would King respond to the reality that 61% of Black people in the United States are still living in poverty or just above the poverty line? In our sick society, the pandemic has also revealed what King referred to as the conjoined evils of racism, poverty, and materialism and militarism that shape our society with nefarious outcomes. It has unveiled how few people of conscience populate our government. It has emphasized that the vast majority of people in our society do not operate as people of conscience. It has set new terms for our collective need for transformation and justice in this world. In the words of one historian, quote, "The pandemic will not create the social transformation we need, but it will set the terms for it," end quote. If the terms are being set, then what should be clear to us is that our sick society still has an incredibly long way to go. In May 2020, 3 months after much of the northeastern United States was sheltering in place due to the pandemic, news about it gave way to a very different illness. The fatal illness of racism re-entered the spotlight after a video-recorded killing of George Floyd was made public. In rapid succession, that same year saw a series of deaths and events that were met with widespread outrage. On March 13th, Breonna Taylor was killed by Louisville police. On May 5th, just 74 days after she was killed, Ahmaud Arbery was murdered by vigilantes while jogging in Georgia. On May 16th also marked the 10-year anniversary of the violent death of Aiyana Stanley Jones, a 7-year-old Black girl fatally shot by a white police officer during a raid in Detroit. Aiyana would have been 17 years old and possibly graduating in the high school class of 2020. Tamir Rice, who was killed by police in Cleveland at the age of 12, would have been 18 and possibly beginning college. On May 25th, George Floyd was killed, or more precisely, he was suffocated to death by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, who put a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds while the other police officers stood and watched. Were it not for the bravery of 17-year-old Darnella Frazier, a Black girl, who captured the killing on camera, what happened to Floyd may have gone unnoticed. In that video, we hear Floyd's final words, "I can't breathe." He calls for his mother with his last breath. That sentence heard throughout the world, "I can't breathe," is painfully familiar. "I can't breathe" haunts us because it recalls the death of Eric Gardner, killed by New York police in 2014. As a refrain, it is a reminder that we live in a sick society in which Black people are gasping for breath. And we need to breathe. Then, before summer 2020 had ended, another unarmed Black man was shot by the police. This time, Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back, 7 times in the back, while his children watched from the car. Although Blake continues to live, he remains paralyzed from the waist down. By the end of summer 2020, it had become commonplace to observe that in the United States we were facing 2 pandemics, COVID-19 and anti-Black racism. I wonder what Martin Luther King would say about these deaths. What would he say about Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, or George Floyd? Having witnessed the deaths of little Black girls like Carol Robertson, Cynthia Wesley, Addie Mae Collins, and Denise McNair, who died as a result of the Klan bombing of a Birmingham church, what would he say about 7-year-old Aiyana? Would King, who once said that for 35 million poor people in America, not to mention just yet the poor in other nations, there is a kind of strangulation in the air? Would he associate that sentence, "I can't breathe," with the strangulation in the air that is systemic injustice? Would he invoke the sacred promise of breath and its biblical significance? Would he respond to the torturous refrain of "I can't breathe" by, like William Barber, returning to the etymology of the word breath as pneuma, which references the wind and remind us that breath is holy. Would he, like the august theologian Sean Copeland, offer reflection that breath should guide us in a meditation rooted in ruha, asking how the spirit would respond to Black death? I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. It is a haunting refrain that strikes us even harder now in 2020 as we live through the realities of a pernicious pandemic, a respiratory virus that literally takes breath away from people. Just as COVID-19 sucks life out of the lungs of those who are stricken by it, racism is both the air we breathe and the system that takes our breath away. This is a very somber beginning, sorry, folks. Sadly, and as many of us are painfully aware, the tragic loss and disregard for Black lives is not unique to the 21st century. It is far from new. It is why King fought and preached and protested and taught the way he did decades ago. It is far from new because we have been here before. Most Black and brown people in the United States are not surprised when lives are senselessly taken or when Black lives seem not to matter outside of ourselves. We have been in a space of mourning over the tragic loss of life for our siblings for most of the 21st century. Not only since 2013, when the hashtag Black Lives Matter was first used after the acquittal of George Zimmerman, the man who killed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, or again in 2014 after the death of Michael Brown, or again when Say Her Name was set in motion after the death of Rekia Boyd. In fact, any time police officers kill Black people and are not found guilty, we are not surprised. As King knew far too well in the 1950s and 60s during the civil rights movement, Black people fought for their right to be human and were faced by ongoing terror. The realities of lynching, being brutalized and beaten by the police, inflictions of state and vigilante violence were quotidian realities. Racial terror has been a feature of life in the United States for more than 4 excruciating centuries. The fact is that it has been occurring since 1619. We've been here before. The protests are familiar. The groundswell is familiar. The chanting refrain of Black Lives Matter is familiar. And yet it feels different. We have not been here before like this because we are in a pandemic, in a global public health crisis because of which the entire world was forced to pause. Yet the racial terror to which Black people are subject in the United States hasn't paused, and these deaths remain. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Today, as before, we say that this is a sick society. As the quotation at the beginning of this book makes clear, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King did not mince his words describing the state of the nation. He spoke the language of lament as frequently and poignantly as he spoke the language of exhortation. He expressed sorrow as much as he prophesied. While we choose to focus on his prophetic anointing and how he dreamed of a more just future, we would do well to explore how the moral mission of his work operated according to a logic of calling things out. In fact, lament is essential for our social justice struggle. Without lament, we cannot fully express the pain and suffering to which we are subject. Without lament, we cannot readjust our vision to see hope on the horizon. Without lament, we cannot feel our feelings, and to not feel those feelings is to deny our humanity. I'm gonna stop there. Sorry, I wasn't watching the time. But I wanted to I know I shifted the mood a little bit here, but I think it's really important, and I always tell my students, and I'm known for saying that all these things are both and, right? So the chapter that I'm not going to read from now is the end where we talk about making justice irresistible. And I talk about both acknowledging the suffering and the pain and the lament, but also the joy and the celebration. and all of the resistance and all of the things that we have that carry us and make us stronger. And as I said this morning, Brian Stevenson always says hopelessness is the enemy of justice, right? And so what propels us to be hopeful is to be able to hold on to both the joy and the suffering, the lament and the praise. Thank you.
And now a reading from I've Been to the Mountaintop, 1968. If I were standing at the beginning of time, with the possibility of a general and panoramic view of the whole human history up to now, and the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight by Egypt through, or rather across the Red Sea, through the wilderness on toward the Promised Land. And in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and say, if you allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. Now that's a strange statement to make, because the world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble is in the land, confusion all around. That's a strange statement, but I know, somehow, that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. Amen. And now please welcome 7th grader Sanaya Hora to the podium for a poetry reading.
Do you speak Indian? She comments that I'm so good at languages. English, French, and do you speak Indian? So many things float through my mind as I watch her twist a straight, silky lock of blonde hair around her finger. I want to tell her that people from India, just a small sample of Indian people in her own city, speak over a dozen languages. We are Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and other religions. We are all different shades, from dark brown to almost as pale as she is. I want to tell her, despite our differences, we have so much in common, trying to make our lives here. My skin has never been white as snow. My eyes are not deep pools of crisp blue. My hair is not the color of golden honey. No, my skin is brown. My eyes are brown. Even my hair, yes, this too, is brown. I am brown and I am proud, but I am American and I am proud. Today, I wake up tired, a tiredness that plagues me. On the radio, news of greater challenges, challenges that require more than I can handle alone. Today, I hesitate. For the first time, I wonder if I should stay home and not walk the neighborhood. Today, I'm frozen, terrified. I cannot hide this skin, this hair, these eyes. Today, I am a witness. I am brown and I am proud, but I am American and I am proud. I am red, white, and blue. I am green cassar and white. I am salt and pepper. I am cardamom and spice. I am JT, Bruno, and Nelly. I am Jagjit, Sonu, and Lata. I am t-shirt and jeans. I am salwar kameez. I am always whole. The color of my skin is brown, but I bleed red, white, and blue, just like you. Today, I remember the sacrifices of my grandmother, her steely eyes that shed many tears, her small, sinewy hands that clung to her children, her diminutive feet that leapt over the ocean. Today, I will use her strength that courses through my veins. Do you speak Indian? I want to tell her I've never studied Tamil or Kannada, the language my parents speak. I want to tell her that when I reach for words in Kannada or Tamil, all my brain can come up with is the French I learned in school. And when I do try to talk, my accent is wrong, wronger than my parents' accents when they speak English. But I don't tell her this, any of this. Instead, I just say, no. Thank you.
I too will be reading an excerpt from I've Been to the Mountaintop. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs reconstructing.
I've been to the mountaintop, 1968. We have been forced to a point where we are going to have to grapple with the problems that men have been trying to grapple with through history, but the demands didn't force them to do it. Survival demands that we grapple with them. Men for years now have been talking about war and peace, but no longer can they just talk about it. It is no longer a choice between violence and nonviolence in this world. It's nonviolence or non-existence. That is where we are today.
For our final performance of the evening, please welcome to the stage MIlton Academy's Upper School Gospel Choir, directed by Miss Lori Dow and Mr. Mark Copeland. Thank you.
Yeah. We were singing Glory, a song written and performed by Common and John Legend. It is a song written for the movie Selma. This movie is about black people fighting for the right to justice in America during the civil rights movement.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be yours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. Glory, oh, glory. Glory.
Yeah. Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against. Yes, glory is destined. Every day, men and women become legends. Since that go against our skin, become lessons. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom's like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, the spirit is revisiting us. Truant living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman a man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up, yo.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be yours. It will be ours. Oh, one day,
yeah. Soundless now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of the crowd. We got the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we've gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, his power was the people. Somewhere in the we had epiphany. Now we might right the wrongs in history. No one can win this war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story that we call victory, the coming of the Lord. My eyes have seen a glory, yeah.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be yours. It will be yours.
One day it will be yours, yeah.
One day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. Oh, glory. 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 One day.
Okay, hi, I'm William, and I'm a member of the gospel choir at MIlton. So today I'm going to be singing Lift Me Up, which is a song by Rihanna, and it's from the movie Wakanda Forever. And I think it has a really beautiful message, and I think it's really worthy of, MLK Day. So here we go. Lift me up, hold me down, keep me close, safe and sound, burning in a hopeless dream. Hold me when you go to sleep. Keep me in the warmth of your love when you depart. Keep me safe, safe.
Lift me up, hold me down, keep me close, safe and sound. Lift me up, hold me down, keep me safe, safe and sound. safe and sound. Lift me up, hold me down, keep me safe. Lift me up, hold me down, keep me safe.
Will, that was amazing. I did not know you could sing like that. That was like, what? Okay. Okay.
Also, just a quick round of applause for everyone that performed today or spoke up here. Thank you to everyone who came out and spoke today, as well as all of you who came out to watch this event. We hope that this was a moment where we were challenged by what we did not know about Dr. King, connected with parts of his vision beyond the dream, and embraced the power that they hold. Let us find ways to create our own narratives and visions for the future. And I think Robin has one she would like to share.
Yes, so I'd like to share a little story. I was at home the other day going to the Civil Rights Museum, and this guy was giving a tour, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's so enticing. Like, I want to go follow this tour. And turns out he was a freedom rider at the age of 13, and he's working at the Civil Rights Museum. So he was 13 when he began his fight for freedom, and he was 13 when he was first imprisoned for his fight for freedom. We may feel young and unready, but so did so many children and teenagers who risked their lives to fight for freedom during the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. King once said, "What you do this day will have an impact on children yet unborn." The change starts here, and the time is now. Thank you.
Also, just reiterating, Dr. John Charles will be out there signing books. Go buy them.
Yes, go get a book.
It's often that I'm humbled following the speakers of MIlton Academy, and I have very little to add to a beautiful, beautiful ceremony, but just a thought which has less to do with words and maybe more to do with a moment in time that you could join me in. I'm so proud, as I'm sure all of us are in Boston, to have the Embrace, this amazing 20-foot plus sculpture in the middle of our city that acknowledges not just the incredible life of Dr. Martin Luther King, but of Coretta Scott King as well, a person that we should mention in the same breath as we do MLK. And this embrace, I think, means so much to so many people. And on this particular day, I hope for us, we're able to take a moment and think about what an embrace means. And at a time like this, where we should not turn away from the injustice and the horror, the violence that plagues all of us. But it's okay to seek the embrace of a beloved community, our beloved community, in the darkest of times. And it is also wonderful and joyful, and truly what that photograph exemplifies, the inspiration behind the embrace, that moment when two amazing people embraced upon MLK's winning of the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize. that indeed we should also seek to embrace each other in moments of extraordinary joy, love, and light. And so on this evening, all together, among each other, I would request that we endeavor both to confront and live and experience the extremes, the true extremes of our human condition, and that with one another we don't hesitate to embrace, because indeed I believe that that is exactly what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would want us to do, always. Thank you for being here this evening. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. Good night.
On the shoulders and said, you can go to Central High School.